Köszöntöm a kedves egybegyűlteket. A kerekasztal beszélgetés angolul fog zajlani, úgyhogy akinek szüksége van fordításra, még most el tudja venni a készülékét a főbejárat mellett, és át is váltok angolra. So welcome everyone. The topic of today's roundtable discussion is the digitization of public collections in Central Europe. We have invited experts from neighboring countries to tell us about their experiences in digitization projects, fears and hopes associated with digitized collections, and to share their views on what may be the best practices to adopt moving forward. I have with me Karolina Tabak from the Museum of Polish History from Poland, Viola Winkler from the Natural History Museum, Vienna from Austria, Ines Vodopivec, Management Board Member of Europeana from Slovenia, and Attila Krajter from the National Institute of Archaeology from Hungary. My name is Anna Kinde. I work as a museologist and researcher at the National Center of Museological Methodology and Information here at the Hungarian National Museum. Something that we will mention a lot, and you already heard about, is an initiative called Europeana, which aims to gather digitized cultural heritage from all across Europe and also to empower cultural institutions in their digital transformation. One of the pillars of Europeana is the so-called Aggregators Forum, where the members are institutions that foster digitization in their own country or their field. There are national, regional, domain, and thematic aggregators. If your museum becomes interested in contributing their digitized collection to Europeana, I can say that the National Aggregator of Hungary, Muzeumap, is one of our exhibiting partners, and you can learn more from them if you visit their table in the exhibitors hall. You will hear about many exciting projects that may be open to cross-border collaborations. So if you hear about anything that might interest you, please don't hesitate to ask questions and to get involved. And let us start the discussion by going around, and I will ask every one of you to describe the collections you are working with, the type of collection, the scope of your work, and also I would like to ask you to tell us about your favorite digitized object. Let's start with Karolina.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am a manager of the Digital Resources Department at Polish History Museum, but my main background and connected with the digitization was at National Museum in Warsaw. I was managing the digitization process over 11 years. So there I could be involved in process of the digitization many objects, because it was a national museum. So the scope of the collection was very wide, from ancient sculpture, prints, drawings, paintings, applied art, to very modern video installations, so like everything. And right now in Polish History Museum, it's a little bit shift, because I'm dealing with objects that are not in the inventory books, but are created and by the museum professionals in some kind of context for the collection. So like oral history, documentary films, podcasts, so everything born digitally that you're creating in museum, but it's not like an object. So we are also creating the metadata, and also we would like to put everything to this collection online. Yes, and my favorite digitized object, yes, this is one on the left. This is a miniature from the collection of National Museum in Warsaw. It's a miniature on ivory from like from the 19th century, and I always knew the picture that is only depicted the image of the eye. When I saw the object itself, it is really small, and I thought that is a big painting, and it's a really small object. It was meant to be in private. it depicted, the part of a face, a person who you love. But I like this thing that, we are digitizing the object, we are watching it, and the object is watching us. So I really like this thing, yeah. So this is my favorite object.
Thank you, Carolina. What about you, Ines? What is the type of collection that you work with?
Thank you very much, first of all, to inviting me here. I'm a little bit, I'm not working in the museum, I'm working in the library, but nevertheless. So I've been involved in digital projects since 2009, I think, from large to smaller ones. The National Library of Slovenia is also the national aggregator for Europeana. So we have been also the establishing partners of Europeana. I've been involved with digital projects for different institutions already for quite some time. We are building our Digital Library of Slovenia also, which is actually a portal of digitized and digitally born cultural heritage. And it's combining also the objects from different other institutions, not only libraries. So if you ask me, I'm primarily involved in written cultural heritage, but of course we also work with museums. Especially in the last year, we have been with Europeana building a project on country groups, because Europeana, I don't know how much you know about it, it's shifting, it's changing to decentralized model. So the aggregators and member states will have more possibility to build their own networks in the country, and we are testing that with our digital projects with country groups. And in this part, we have built special educational programs also for museums. For example, how to prepare the metadata, how to aggregate, how to digitize, etc., etc. And we do it on the national level, on the national scale. We have some people that are coordinating these events, and of course that also counsel to the staff of the museums. So they provide information to how to publish, for example. I would chose for today, and you have it on the 7th slide, I think. I chose for today a different objects. Although I'm involved in, as I said, written cultural heritage, and one of my beloved projects is also Incunabula Slovenica, from the co-financed by the UNESCO. I've chosen two other, and this is small objects from the excavations of the Roman period in Ljubljana, which we did the digitization already in 2009, the 3D digitization in 2009, and we used the objects printed in 3D to use them, for example, for touristical purposes in the City Museum of Ljubljana. And last year, when we were doing the Twinit 3D campaign, I don't know how much you heard about it. It was the campaign of the European Commission on the recommendations from 2021. That more 3D, more museum objects should be aggregated to Europeana, and then they made the Twinit 3D campaign, and we aggregated two objects, two parts. The collection of the 3D digitized objects from the Emonica, that's the Roman objects, and the second one was, which I also like because I actually work there, is the 3D model of our national and university library, which is also UNESCO protected, but we made a laser scan of the whole building, so we have every millimeter of the building scanned, and we made an VR trip through the library that is also for touristic and educational purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. What about you, Viola?
Good morning. So I'm responsible for the 3D lab at the Natural History Museum in Vienna. So basically all the collections at the museum can use the services in the 3D lab. So we have zoological collection, a prehistoric department, anthropological collection, we have fossils, paleontology. So it's quite a wide range of objects or collections that all have different needs that we try to deal with when they come for 3D digitization. So anything with 3D digitization is related or I'm involved. We just finished our biggest digitization project this year, where we digitized over 100,000 objects, not solely in 3D, mostly in 2D, but also over 400 3D models. And they also go into a platform that is an aggregator for Europeana. Yeah, and maybe for my favorite digitized object, it's this fossil of an extinct giant marine turtle. Why is that? That is an object that is also exhibited at the museum, so people can look at it and visit it. But the 3D model is the only option to actually see underneath the fossil, because it is mounted in a way that you can see underneath, but actually the flippers of the marine turtle are underneath. And the 3D model is now the only option to actually explore the underside as well, because we climbed underneath it, and we also got rid of the mounting to some degree, so we can capture it from underneath. And I think that is one of the beauty of 3D models, to also show things that you might not be able to see in person, even if you visit a museum.
Absolutely. And Attila, what about you? What type of collections
Good morning.
do you work with?
I work with archaeological collections that include digitizing of objects and documentations. We work mainly on documentations, but from all over, from Hungary. These documentations mainly digitize the older ones, which paper forms and manuscripts and so on. And what we try to do with these is to get out as much metadata of these documentations and the objects and everything, basically what we can put our hands on. And these metadata are then included into our Hungarian archaeological database, which was developed as a part of the Ariadne and Ariadne Plus programs. And now this database is basically my favorite. I don't have a favorite archaeological objects, because this is what we developed in the last 10 years. 6 people working very hard on this database, and now it includes all the registered Hungarian sites, which is more than 60,000, and it includes like 1.2 million files, which can be accessed and downloaded by archaeologists. So it's fairly restricted. The access is fairly restricted, but archaeologists can have access all the data. They don't have any restriction. So it's basically this database. It has open parts for the public, so people can gather information about the living spaces and where they live and what kind of archaeological sites there are on their homes. But the majority of the data, the documentations, are restricted for archaeologists.
Thank you so much. And I think it's time to begin the real conversation, and let's jump into one of the more exciting but also most difficult question to answer. Why do you think it is important to digitize objects? Who would like to begin?
Well, I think that nowadays the digitization of our collections is almost mandatory. You cannot imagine that you are not in the digital world. And our mission is to preserve, but also to promote our collection and the history behind them. So I think that it's very important for us to seek the audience also in the digital world. Of course, nothing will compare to a traditional visit in the museum, but the digital world makes us many possibilities for different projects, and for many of us, but also we have to think about the youth. The digital world is very natural for them. This is the natural environment for them. So, and we are creating, the next generation. So I think it is really important that we put our history, our heritage in their own visual culture. So it is really important as to be there. So the aspect of promoting, of really engaging projects, educational, and more creative, it's really a great opportunity to reach a very different part of people. But I also want to mention the thing that I really wasn't aware of, that how much important it is, the preservation of the objects. We have last month a big cultural congress in Poland. Many professionals from the sector, from the cultural institution, but also artists. And the beginning of this congress was a speech from two museum professionals from Ukraine. They were just video because they couldn't be there, of course, with us. And they told about how important is to digitize the objects, how important is to create metadata, to preserve also this digital information, because they said it's too late for us. They lost many part of their collections about documentation that was only in paper. They couldn't reach it anymore. So there was like a cold shower for us. We didn't think about it, but you know, it's a struggle. It's a hard times right now. So everybody was thinking about, okay, this is some kind of mission, not only cool stuff, digitizing the objects, but we are preserving the heritage. So I think this is also important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yola?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that's also one of the most important things where we should digitize, just to preserve it, and also if something gets destroyed, that we can still access it, at least in the form of a digital object, or at least the metadata of it. And also we can not assume that everyone can actually physically travel to a museum. That would be ideal. Everyone comes, everyone sees a 3D model online of something and then comes and visits it. But I think that the access to a museum collection should not be restricted to people who can physically visit it, and may that be for whatever reason. And I think that's also one important thing why we should digitize objects, to just make it more accessible, both for researchers but also for society in general.
What do you guys think about the idea that if you digitize your objects, then people will not come to the museum because they already have the object at hand?
That was a theme I wanted to address now. Thank you. I would start with a fear. We all have a fear. And the biggest fear is usually the change of what is going to happen, the change of how we will transform, the change of management of resources, etc., etc., and the change of the of what will users do at the other side after we not digitize is also very present. For libraries, maybe not so much, because we have to, if we want to lend a book, we have to have it in some kind of accessible digital infrastructure. We have to have a catalog in digital form. We have to have some kind of accessibility for every object in our collections. But of course, for other heritage institutions, that's different. But if I am a user, if you are users, what do you do when you go, for example, for touristic or any other purposes? For example, the ones that traveled yesterday or today to Budapest, what did you do before you went here? You went on Google and you searched for what? For cultural collections. You made some research on what is interesting to see in the collections of heritage institutions. So if there was nothing special on, I will say Google, but yesterday it was also the talk about Instagram, as I heard in the morning. So if we are not present in the digital world, nobody will come. They will miss us. They will. If you are not there, they don't see you. So we have to be present in the digital world. If it's the older generation or the younger generations, if they don't have any access to what our collections are built of, they will not even visit us. And it's not only digital visit, it's also physical one. So this is very important to have in mind. And another thing that already my colleague here mentioned is, of course, the data for research. If you have collections that's, for example, special for humanities and social sciences, the digitized objects, also the digitally born collections, are very important for the researchers. And this is also a circle that we usually don't do. We are always the content providers, and typically the outcome, especially now when we have a lot of discussions about the open science, the final research results are never back connected to the digital objects that we have in our collections, and this is also one of the issues we have to address. Attila.
Okay, I don't have a fear. I see this as an opportunity, a step forward, an opportunity to reimagine how we connect with the past, because we can provide opportunities for all sorts of audiences, for different target groups, from children to the less able, for example. And in the museum we have a specific program for the less able. So it opens completely new avenues to show objects to the public. So this is how I see, and obviously we can develop interactive tools. I just wrote a few things here. There is where they can. There is a way where they can collect their own objects in an application and make their own collection. And there are international examples that, for example, the Zooniverse, where they engage in public, so they gather digital volunteers to do this work for the museums, and people can start sharing their stuff. So it's an opportunity, all in all.
I also think that it mostly makes people more excited to visit a museum than the opposite. I mean, if it were the case that if we know something digitally we don't want to visit anymore, people would not queue to see the Mona Lisa, right? You can buy it for €5 in a much bigger format, in high quality. People still stand in line to watch the original, because emotionally it's just a completely different experience than watching something on a screen. But you have to know it's there, and as I mentioned earlier, if you can't travel, you can still experience it, and that is also great. So I also see it more as an opportunity than something to be afraid of.
I agree 100%. And I think that we have already established some target audiences for this digitization. So those who want to come to the museum but maybe wouldn't have found out about the collection in another way, those who cannot come to the museum at all, and maybe those who are researchers and want to access the knowledge that these collections have and the metadata associated with them. So what is your guys' experience? How can we promote digitized objects so that they can reach their target audience better?
Well, I think that we have to make projects that are fit to our audience need. If you can maybe show, I think, third slide. This one, yes. So we did in the National Museum in Warsaw, this is just an image from the left, the online catalog. So it is like, I think, like a base. So we are creating something like a storage room that anybody can walk in and see whatever you like. But if we want it to be, something more, we have to put our data in different places, different repositories. So we have to seek for our audience. So it is really important that if we are putting our collection online, make the data interoperable, make open APIs so that it could be put in many different places, and also in aggregatories like Europeana or something else. But you can close the data, because it will be closed and also closed for many people. And, we did a project in National Museum in Warsaw, when we are thinking about how to get bigger audience online, because in first months it was increasing, but that it became flat. So we were thinking about where our audience are. So as you mentioned, the Google, yeah? When you were putting like an artist name, like a famous Polish artist name, the first pages was Wikipedia. So it was like 2015 or 16. I was also on a visit in Rijksmuseum, and they did it. They put their collection in Wikipedia during the time that the museum was in the restoration, so people couldn't walk in. So we started the cooperation at the called Wikimedia Foundation. Like, what about something we can do something together? And the first very simple project was just putting our collection, our highlights, about 800 objects, in high quality with good metadata, with all the links that was linking to our website in the Wikimedia Foundation, this repository. And then the numbers was just like, oh my God. In our website, the most popular object was like 5,000, and in Wikimedia it was in millions. And it started spreading in every possible language. So even very general articles, like for example, military painting in British Wikipedia was using the objects from our collection, and it was great. And the other one, the other picture is it was a project in Polish History Museum, so something different, but small project, but engaging people. So people could bring us their souvenirs, different souvenirs that they could talk about history of their families. It was very private, but they wanted to share. We have digitized it, and we didn't create any database. It is a website that tells story, that your story, your object, your heritage, this is important. So I think that not only very big and budget-consuming projects, but also quite small one, and engaging really even local community. This is our goal for next years.
Yeah, if I could just pick up on the projects. Very interesting idea. I've heard about it, I think, 2 years ago also at the Europeana conference. I would pick up on the projects, but I would address another theme, and that's interdisciplinary cooperation between not only different museums or researchers, but also with different institutions cooperating. We had an Od Europa project. I don't know if you heard about it. It was a project about smells in history. So you cannot catch a smell. That's impossible. You can have a perfume, but you cannot catch a smell of, for example, of hell. That's an interesting case. Or, for example, of home, of feeling nice in some environment, of love, for example, etc., etc. So we made a project with the Scientific Academy of Amsterdam, of Netherlands, different museums, different heritage institutions, also libraries, also chemists, also anthropologists, also different other branches of sciences. It was a huge project. It was not a small one, but nevertheless, the best quality of the project was the cooperation between different sciences, between different institutions. What they did is they built a corpora from our textual metadata from our digital collections. They extracted the words about smells. For example, you have a smell of a bread. Bread is made at home. Mom is doing the bread, so you feel comfortable, nice in a home environment where you have the smell of the bread. And then they caught different information and built upon the information to produce the scents, like perfumes of different smells from history. So they also did a hell. And they used the metadata that they collected from first of all it was textual corpora, and the second was also pictorial analysis, where they gathered information of what were people thinking about in history when they were thinking about hell. And it's of course it's sulfur, it's smoke, it's also for example mud, it's all different different sorts of smells, and they combined it, and they made a, I will say, perfume, and they made a box of such perfumes that can be used in museums, in the collections, to show people, if they come, for example, in Van Gogh's museum in Den Haag, you have a collection of Van Dyck, and there you have the smell of sewers, you know, of the canals of the Amsterdam that really stink. But it's interesting because when you come there in the collection, you smell the stink of the canals where people lived. So you can actually transform yourself when you are looking at pictures and objects to that area, to that time when where the painting or something was made. So it's really a transformation for the visitors to really get the sense of also when the objects were made. And this is something special because the smell, the smells, the scents are very much implemented in our memory, even more than we actually can admit or know. And it's it really helps you to understand the collections. So yeah.
That is so amazing. So when we started uploading our 3D models based on 3D scans, we also struggled with, okay, how do we actually share it now and how do we promote that they are online? And the question is always, do we host it on our own servers or do we use maybe a commercial platform to distribute the 3D models? And I think it's on the next slide. So we ended up using Sketchfab, which now is a bit tricky because they would change the platform, which might affect cultural heritage. But we had quite a success with hosting it here because realistically no one will search for this on our website. We would not reach people. And now we get clicks on our 3D models, like 300 or 400 clicks per day. We are up to 470,000 accesses, glaube ich. I think that was German for a bit, I'm sorry. And we see that people downloaded our 3D models over 20,000 times. And these are numbers we would never reach if we would host this locally. Of course, the risk is always what if the platform changes. So we will see how that will affect us in the next year, because that is something that's currently happening with Sketchfab. And that means we also need another form to preserve this, and we have a data repository where we also upload the 3D models. But to access that, you would have to find our website and then search for it. And this is way more interactive. We have annotations on the 3D model, so if you rotate it, you can get extra information on each object, and we spend a lot of time to make it nice for users. And we also use 3D printing platforms to upload our 3D models, and we get feedback from teachers from time to time who were like, oh, we printed this for our class and we used it to talk about prehistory, and that's also nice to see that people actually use it, or they just print it for their own home collection, be like, oh, I painted this, here's a picture. So we see that people use it, and that is one way how we promote this. We also have press releases, we throw it in the magazine, in our museum magazine when we can, so we really try to make people aware that this exists. And yeah, and I think we will talk more about the scientific part a bit later, so I'm gonna give the word to you.
Thank you. We use all opportunity to engage people, not just through online resources, obviously, but we go to all the festivals possible, not only heritage festivals, but you may know that Hungary is very famous for its music festivals in the summer. So when we can reach tens of thousands of people. And at these festivals, actually, we realize that they are very interested in archaeology and digitized objects and so on, but in many times a question popped up that how you do it, and then it clicked that, okay, let's show them behind the scene features, so how digitization is made, how we analyze objects, and how archaeology works in reality. And actually we found that these are more interesting for them than the objects itself, even if it has a nice description and so on.
That's actually very interesting, and it kind of aligns with this general trend nowadays of storytelling. So I think that people are interested because people are interested in the stories that the objects can tell us. I also wanted to ask you guys, because the next section will be about AI. What do you think, how can AI be used in digitization, and what do you think about the fears that museologists and librarians might have of AI being used on their collections, and maybe that they don't have ownership of those objects and those texts anymore?
Well, I think the fear is spreading amongst many people right now, but it is important to acknowledge that AI is not a solution. Is a tool that we have to know how to use it, how to control it. So right now, like in Poland, this is not. There are some projects that are involving the AI. Mainly, we are identifying the more repeatably this part of work that constantly is repeating and is quite simple, and we can control it and we can write it down how to use it. So, for example, creating the metadata, keywords, transcribing, like in my work, transcribing the oral history, because it's not so simple when you have elderly people talking with different accents, and this is very, very time consuming. So if these tools can help us, this is great, but because we can have more time for more creative work. So we have to think about that, not that the AI is some kind of replacing us. But I think there's many challenges in this, and also many risks, how to use it wisely. There are some projects, like, for example, Warsaw Ghetto Museum launched a project. It was with facial recognition, so they put a lot of images from Warsaw Ghetto, and they are identifying the people, so it's quite interesting. And also one of the audiovisual archive, and they put a repository and also online catalog with the more semantic web, so you can really browse this very wide collection of historical documentary films, and also many films, and using more natural language, because also it's very important that we have to create very good, reliable data, because these data are sort of nourishing the AI. So the AI is learning from us. So it's really important not to, let the AI create the data. No, we can use it, of course, but the bias of the data and so on. So it's our mission to create an objective and qualified data, because then it will be easier for us.
Yeah, well, besides other, I'm also the representative of the AI for LAM community, which is a worldwide community, and there are different institutions involved, also the Smithsonian Museum, Library of Congress, Stanford University, British Library, BNF, that's Bibliothèque Nationale de France, most recently also the Vatican Library. And of course, I'm an advocate of the AI use in cultural heritage institutions, that's for sure. But of course, there is kind of a fear of unknown, which I already said, and that's also for the use of AI, of course, in all heritage institutions. But there are very good examples, the colleague also said some, when you implement the AI in the collection in a digital collection, you can use it very well as a tool. I love when my colleague says, okay, there's nothing artificial and there's nothing intelligent about the AI, and that's for sure. It's made by humans, and it can be dynamic and can be used as a very good tool. On the contrary, with like this very common ChatGPT or something that we use at home, when you implement it into the collections, it can give you a very well guided, for example, results. It can also create metadata. Of course, I know you have to train it first, but still, it can even search the objects without the metadata. So you can have this vector analysis without the metadata. So you don't need to have very huge amounts of people employed just to produce the metadata. I think this is going to shift and change, especially in libraries where our profession is kind of a creation of metadata, and this will not be the case in, let's say, a decade. And people will maybe be engaged more in intellectual work, in work with users, educational, restorational, all other sorts of engagements that we have in heritage institutions, and not so much in just this manual metadata creation, which can be used, the machines can be used for that. So.
Thank you. We are so much looking forward to this era. I can't really wait. I love AI. I love the opportunities it could provide. And within our institution, concerning archaeology, we developed a kind of pilot projects. One of them is already in progress. And we have like a dozen pilot projects in plan that how AI can be used in archaeology. Just mention a few, like site identification from aerial maps and all the historical maps, AI drawing of objects, data procurement for inventorying objects, which very time consuming if you do it by person, data procurement for gathering metadata and then put it in the archaeology database, data search, online databases and combination of all online resources for particular archaeological sites, language processing and translation into several languages. It's fairly easy to do it. Virtual restoration, for example, and so on. There are many other things that we are very much looking forward to this, and now we're waiting for the result for our first pilot project, which include the gathering of from the documentations. We want to gather all metadata for our 60-something thousand archaeological sites, and we want AI to make a summary for each archaeological sites. So it's in progress.
That's actually awesome to hear. I think that we can see that there are examples where, although we have this perception of AI that it is creating new things, like it is used for advertising and content creation, but in the right hands, it can actually be used to help us do the boring stuff so that we can create. So that was kind of the theme that was spread throughout. And we are kind of approaching the end of our conversation, but before we let our speakers go, I wanted to ask you guys about how do you envision the Central European digitization space, and whether there are any exciting projects that you would like to tell us that have been going on or are going on right now. And also if you have any ideas on maybe how Central Europe is different from Western Europe or from the USA, that would also be interesting. But any project that you wish to mention, now is the time.
Maybe I'll start. So we were lucky that we got a lot of funding by the government now to do digitization, and that was possible due to the next-gen EU funds that were created to help the member states of the EU recover from COVID and also make them more resilient against if that happens again. And Austria decided with their money to spend 15 million on funding digitization projects, and not just projects and part of it's digitization, but only digitization of cultural heritage. And that was an opportunity we didn't have before. And that was also the project I mentioned earlier, where we have digitized over 100,000 objects. And if we go to the third slide, what they also did with that money is fund a platform which is called Kulturpool, so it's like Culture Pool, and all the digital objects that were created in these projects will go into this platform and link back to the local databases, and you can search through all entries, like across institutions. So it's libraries, it's museums, it's archives, and that's just a completely new opportunity that we didn't have before. It is also a knowledge hub, so they offer webinars, they offer online cafes, because we're Vienna, so we do cafes. And it's just also a support structure to help smaller institutions to actually create an infrastructure that they can digitize and also link it to the Kulturpool, and the Kulturpool is the aggregator for the Europeana. So that was a new opportunity that we had, and probably different to other countries who struggle maybe more to actually get funds to do digitization, because in the past it was also you do a project and then you have like 50 digital objects, and everyone uses their own metadata schemes, so it might not be able to link it together. Where do you host the data? Everyone hosts the data somewhere else. To really have a platform that now pools together all the data is something completely new, and I'm excited to see where this is going, because that started last year, so it's still an ongoing process.
Can I return the remark? That's amazing. No, really, because there's what I see from Europeana and like this international environment is that we all have a kind of a division between institutional divisions. So libraries are totally different from other heritage institutions. Museums are totally different from archives. Why? We all have metadata, we all have digital objects, and we all have digital infrastructure. So this that you combine together on one platform so that user can find results, for example, about one person, but can be from different collections, that is top. So
yeah, I think they're doing amazing work. I'm really impressed by them as well.
Yeah, so this is also the experience I wanted to share, that actually we have in all different countries, no matter West or East or Central European or whatever, we have all the same division between the institutions and the thinking that we are different, but we are actually not. So, yeah.
I think that the difference is maybe, because I really agree with you. We all have heritage, yes. So, but of course there are some different challenges. Like for example, the aim of the European Commission that was in the document from the 21. They are focusing on this 3D digitization. Like in Poland, that many collections from museums. Of course, there's a division. We have really many two-dimensional objects. So 3D is maybe not an option, but it's still there are of course funding problems. So we are digitizing more when we have a grant, when we have a project. But when we don't have, it's the numbers are lower down. So there are no internal workshops for 3D scanning, because it's a fund consuming. Right now it's more popular to just have a photo studio and be focused on the two-dimensional digitization. But it's starting to change, but I think it will take several years to skip up here. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So, sorry, if I just add, I do agree that there are some kind of, I would say, historically related differences, that the thinking that in library every book has to be accessible every second, and then that we have more developed digital infrastructures. That is true, because we had to build our catalogs, and it's different than keeping the heritage of the museums in the storages, that you don't need to access each object every day or every minute. That is true. But actually, what we now in the digital transformation, we should go in the same direction. So that's why I very like your project.
I completely agree with Ines and Carolina, and I think we have to get all opportunities we can. There are so many programs actually concerning heritage digitization, like Creative Europe, Digital Europe, and there was the Ariadne and Ariadne Plus program, and now is the Maya, Managing Artificial Intelligence in Archaeology, which we are in. It is a cost action, but this is a doorstep of a further EU program, so there are plenty of opportunities, I think.
Right. I think it's time to thank our speakers for accepting our invitation. Carolina, Ines, Viola, and Attila, thank you so much for accepting us. And if you heard something today that you would like to learn more about, please feel free to seek out our speakers in the breaks and ask them yourselves. Otherwise, thank you for your attention.